Hello and welcome to JP's very lazy blurring captions tutorial. So I assume you're here because you downloaded the first part of my tutorial, which is the actual action. Woohoo! Yay! This action is for people who want to give variety shows but hate the giant captions. I get it, it makes sense when you're actually viewing the TV show, but when you're making GIFs, not so much. The text is distracting, it's annoying, and we do not want that. So as you can see on the left hand side, I'm going to drag on the right hand side, whoops, I'm going to drag my cursor, and you can see that I have already selected this action, and you will have downloaded this by this time and uploaded to your captions, whatever this properties bar is called. I'm sorry, I'm not really a Photoshop expert. So anyway, so it has two parts. You're probably wondering what action has two parts. You will find out in due time why this action needs two parts, because there's some manual effort involved, which kind of contravenes the needs for an action. But trust me, once you play these actions, it is going to make your life and making blurring captions so much easier. 4 years ago, I hated going manually, so I created a caption because I'm the laziest person in the world. So I created this action. It's helped me a lot, saved me a lot of time, so I hope it can do the same for you. And the reason I am, once again, making this tutorial as a video is because there's too much to type up, and there are some things that you can only learn by seeing me actually do it. Typing it will not make sense. I personally would not know how to articulate it, so this is the best way. It's the best way to look at the video, kind of go back, pause when you need to, make the playback 1.5 or 0.5, whatever you need. So anyway, basics are, I assume if you're watching this tutorial and you have the actions downloaded, you know some level of Photoshop at this point. You know some level of GIF making. If you are going to blur captions, which I consider kind of an advanced level of GIF making. So at this point, you have your video exported to frames and layers. If you don't know how to access the timeline, click on window and you go to the bottom where it says timeline, click that, and you should have this. And you should have your layers on your right hand side. So the most important thing, and I will really harp on this, the most important thing is make sure that your first frame and your first layer are selected. Do not have your any other layer, any other frame selected. This is very important for this action to work properly. Otherwise, you'll find the action skipping. You'll find it not actually doing what it's needed to. So please make sure, first of all, that the first frame of the GIF and the first layer, even if you've deleted like a few frames and it's not visible, doesn't matter as long as the first frame and first GIF are selected. The reason, trust me, you'll understand why I'm harping on it. Once you have that selected, all you need to do is click part 1 and play it. That's it. And wait for it to run. So, and now you can see there's a little bit of a glow. Why is Namjoon glowing like that? I mean, he as a person he does. Anyways, so you'll see a bit of a glow, and you'll see why. This is the Gaussian. Anyways, this is the Gaussian blur effect, which is what we're going to be using to blur our captions. As you can see, the Gaussian blur that I have set up is 8.0. That can be less for some people, that can be more. It depends on what you like. If you would like to change the volume of it, where it says Gaussian blur, just double click that. It'll pop up, and currently right now the volume that I like using is 9.5. I don't know if it goes 0.5, but I like using 9. 9 I feel like works for me. As you can see, as with many variety shows, they'll do a lot of text flipping effect, and it'll be like, as I'll play it, you'll understand. It's like, popping up, and you don't want to select the first version of it because that's only going to select a very short form of the caption. And you'll understand what I mean by select. So I would recommend that you take the pointer, or whatever this little guy is called over here, drag it to the part where the caption is the biggest in the entire GIF series. So it looks like around this part, the caption is as big as it's going to get for the duration of this clip. So I'm just going to stop the pointer here. Then I will select the marquee tool So I don't know why the name isn't popping up. This is the rectangular marquee tool, so I'll select it. You can use the rectangular one, or I've used this elliptical one as well in the past, but the rectangular one works best for this intended purpose. So you select it, and all you do is just make this box around your caption. And that's it. The next step that you do, very important, do not miss that. Because you're in the center, technically you're in the center of the GIF, go back to your little pointer, buddy. Drag it back to the beginning. Now that you have that, make sure that the top layer is selected, whichever, it doesn't matter whichever, it is the top layer that's selected, and that caption is selected. It's okay if it looks bigger than what the caption is right now at the beginning part of the clip. Doesn't matter, it'll be worth it. Just click on part 2. Click play and let it run. And it's pretty fast. It works pretty fast. So, and then you'll see that the caption's now blurred. So you click play and you'll see that the caption, it extends out of bounds a little bit, but mostly you'll see that it's blurred. It's not distracting. The blur is how much I like. It depends on you. You could have less blur or you could do more blur with the tool that I showed you in the beginning. Up to you. That is personal preference. So what we basically did is we laid on a Gaussian blur mask on a top layer, then we selected a section of that layer and we masked it. So the only blur, the Gaussian blur, is only around the caption part that is annoying to us and that we want blurred or disappeared or whatever. I'm going to go back a few steps and I'm going to make the Gaussian blur even more drastic, so it kind of helps you visualize on what you really can achieve with Gaussian blur. So let's say I use 12, which I've never really done, but we will see what 12 looks like in this setting. Okay, now we'll let it run once again. Just to give you guys an idea what 9 looks versus 12. So as you can see, it's almost completely can't see. I personally don't like this version because I want to have some semblance of that something was there. But if you prefer this, totally up to you. You know, it's art, subjective, up to you, whatever you prefer. And then on top of this, what it also does, and this is what I've put in all my actions, that it makes all the layers in a group. So if you want, you can put any color adjustment, any adjustment layer on top of it. Doesn't matter. You don't have all the layers showing. I hate that. But if you don't want that, that's totally fine. You can just right click and click ungroup layers, so that'll make the layers visible again. I also have added in the last step that the default timestamp is 0.05, which is what I personally prefer in GIFs I make for Twitter. But if you'd like, you can definitely, select all the frames and change the time, whatever time stamp frame, what is it called? Frame rate, whatever, to whatever you'd like, whatever you feel more comfortable with. That this is totally arbitrary. This is from what I prefer, but you could change it. It's very easily changed. So I'm sure most of you won't have a problem with that. Now you're wondering, but JP, there's a lot of GIFs that have different captions in different places. Don't worry, I got you. That's why we have another example. I just chose Run BTS because they're being goofy and we have the examples that we need. So I'll play this GIF. This is the original clip. Jimin and Jungkook being clowns. We love it. They're hilarious. So you can see that 2 text versions popped up at different times. So how do you select both these text versions and make sure that only those parts are selected? What you can do, what I'm going to run through with you, is once again make sure your first frame and first layer selected. Go back to part 1, play it. So now we're playing it. I don't know. I'm so nervous recording this. I feel like I need to fill the silence with something. Anyways, I'm making it shorter so I can see. So I'm just going to drag it to a part where I can see both text versions, both text of the caption visible. And you'll understand why just a second. Now you've done the same thing. You've selected the marquee tool of, also pro tip, if you click M on your keyboard, it automatically selects the marquee tool. And then what you do is you again select the first text part. This is like normal, like the previous. Leave it and then click or select shift. Yeah, hold on to the shift key. I think it's the same for Mac, the shift key. Hold on to the shift key and then just draw another box around the second. So what this will do, it'll make sure that both of the text versions are selected. Same thing, you can change your Gaussian blur amount, change it to 9, 10, whatever you'd like. I change it to 9. Click on part 2. Make sure you're taking your pointer buddy back to the beginning, otherwise it's not going to have a fun time. Click on part 2 and click play. So once you click play, you'll see that both text captions are blurred, but everything else in the GIF is visible. Now, at this point, you're also wondering, JP, but there's a bits in the beginning where there's no text, and I don't want that part to be blurred. I only want the part where the text shows up. Yeah, that we can do that as well. But for that, you will have to pause at this point when you've selected all the text that you need to blur out. So let's say we go at the beginning. There's no text that you need to blur out. Take your pointer and go to the point where you can see the text almost starting to show up, like the littlest part, and drag this guy, this top layer, in your video timeline. You'll see a little anchor thing that shows up. Just drag it to where your pointer is, so you know it's starting. And then, this is very important, make sure you drag your pointer back to the beginning where the bottom layer begins. And once again, you go to part 2 and you press play. So you'll see, but wait, the blur doesn't show up, JP. Don't worry, you'll see the magic in a second. You press play, and the blur shows up only when the text shows up. Unfortunately, when you have two texts selected, it will start up when the first text shows up, and if you do want the blur to show up in two different blurs, you will have to make multiple layers. That's a bit advanced. I wouldn't recommend it this time because it really doesn't take anything away from the GIF, but it gives you that little extra bit of space if you want. At the beginning, you don't want any blur in your GIF. So there you go. Those are the basics of how to use my blurring action. And you can do it by yourself, and you can, when you hold on the shift key, you can select as much text, or it doesn't even have to be text. It can be anything that you don't want shown in the GIF. Like if you don't want this random, purple, whatever their flying yoga mat, whatever thing is called, you can if you're holding down the shift key, you can select as much stuff that's in the background or whatever you want to blur out. And that's basically, it's very simple, very easy. Like I said, I'm lazy. I made it all for everyone who can't be bothered to repeat these actions again and again. So I hope it's useful for you. And I'm sorry if you could hear my weird breathing during this video part of this tutorial. Thank you for sticking by for this explanation, and you can always feel free to send me an ask on deokmis, that's DEOKMIS on Tumblr, if you have any questions about this actions. You can also send a question to user dramas, that's USERDRAMAS on Tumblr. That's the blog that I'm a part of, and that's where this resource is published. So feel free to reach out to me there. We do a lot of resources, and if you're a fan of Asian media and make Asian media content, please come join us. So that's really fun. Hope you learned something and hope you enjoyed this action.